Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Katie. I'm adding up Addingtons, and today I am going to be talking about foster care and adoption with babies versus teenagers. So stick around. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so glad you've stopped by. My name is Katie and I have 8 children. We are former foster parents. We're an adoptive family. My husband built his company from the ground up. We homeschool and we love to travel and adventure together. And we just talk about all the things over here. So I would love for you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and stick around with us because we love to share our adventures with you. So today I wanted to talk about foster care and adoption with babies versus teenagers. And yes, we have fostered and adopted babies and teenagers. So I hear people say things like, well, if you get a baby, they have fewer issues. Or the teens in foster care are the bad kids or the rough kids. Or teens don't want to be adopted. Or you can't get a baby in foster care. All of these things. So I want to break down some myths and misconceptions and tell you the truth and our own experience. The biggest truth that you have to remember, and I say this all the time, but I will continue to say it. Kids get into foster care because someone or something fundamentally failed them. Someone or something has fundamentally failed them. Kids do not come into foster care because it is their fault or because they choose to do it or because someone called the police on a whim. They get into foster care because someone or something has fundamentally failed that child in their life along the way. All right, so let's talk some foster care general statements. In the early 2000s, the U.S. saw a steady decline in the number of children coming into foster care. And that continued to drop until somewhere around 2016, 2017, when the opioid crisis here in the U.S. really took hold, and the numbers have been steadily growing for the last 4 or 5 years. So the single biggest factor for kids coming into custody is neglect. Now that could be a failure to provide the things that they need, such as food, housing, clothing, supervision, education, that kind of thing. It can be unsanitary conditions. It can be extremely dirty, extremely cluttered. Think like true hoarding, that kind of thing where it is unsafe for a child and unhealthy for a child to live in those conditions. And then in some places, prenatal drug exposure counts as neglect. Other places it is qualified as actual abuse. But that is a big factor of kids coming into custody. So we hear the horror stories about physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. But the number one thing bringing kids into custody is actually neglect. So in the United States, at any given point in time, there are about 440,000 children in foster care. Now that's not the total number in a year. That is at any given point in time. That is about how many kids are in foster care. So some of those are coming in, some will go out, but at any point in time, there are about 440,000 children in custody. So of those 440,000, the average age is 8 years old. There are roughly equal percentages of those kids are 5 and under versus 12 and over. The smallest portion is actually that 5 to 12 range, but there's actually roughly equal numbers of babies and toddlers versus teenagers who are in foster care right now. So of all of those kids, of those 440,000 kids at any given point in time, roughly 50% of them will be reunified either with their parents or their primary caregiver. Services have been enacted, therapy has been put in place to make the child's home safe and appropriate so that they can be reunified with their family. Another 25% will be adopted, usually by their foster families. So that leaves another 25% of kids who are either waiting for an adoptive family or who will age out of foster care. Now that age out is different in every state, between 18 and 21. Some states continue to support young adults as they transition into adulthood, and sometimes kids are just straight out of luck at 18. So first, let's talk about babies. So a lot of people believe that if you adopt a baby, they're going to have fewer issues along the way, or that you'll get a fresh start and the child just won't remember and it will be as if nothing had ever happened. And let me just tell you that that is not true. And a lot of people also, on the flip side, people think that, well, you never hear about babies waiting for adoptive families, so if you want to adopt a baby, you can't go through foster care. And that is also not true. Again, remember I said there are actually equal percentages of babies versus teenagers in the system. There is just a higher rate of adoptive families who are willing to adopt a baby than there are willing to adopt teens. So the truth about babies in foster care is that babies are more than twice as likely as older kids to have health issues. Now, this could be either poor health in general. A lot of that comes from those things we talked about in neglect. They may have poor health in general, or they may have chronic conditions or issues that are ongoing throughout their life. They're more than twice as likely as babies to have health issues than older kids coming into foster care. So if you think a baby's going to have fewer issues, a lot of times they actually have way more. One statistic I found said that 61% of infants coming into foster care have been exposed to illegal or prescription drugs in utero. So prenatal drug exposure. Now, that statistic was a couple years old, and I would be willing to bet that it's actually quite a bit higher than that as the opioid crisis continues, especially in urban areas. Prenatal drug exposure can lead to something called NAS, neonatal abstinence syndrome. And this is essentially newborn babies withdrawing from their parents' drug habit. They end up being in the NICU for a long time after they are born, and it can be very mild up to extremely severe and cause seizures and tremors and breathing problems and all kinds of stuff. So a lot of them will have some form or some level of NAS. Then that withdrawal and exposure turns into developmental delays, such as speech, fine motor, gross motor, and learning difficulties. Sensory processing issues are very, very common in these kids, as well as executive functioning disorders. Those pretty much come with the territory of prenatal drug exposure. It can affect physical development, and it can cause a suppressed immune system so that they continue to have health issues throughout their lives. And in little ones, it can even be a huge factor in failure to thrive. So one article that I read while I was researching this video said, if you get a newborn infant from foster care, you need to assume that there was prenatal drug exposure. And in my experience, that's very true. Infants are also much, much more likely to have a family's history with DCS or DHS, the Department of Children's or Human Services, depending on your state. They are more likely that their family has already been on DCS or DHS's radar. They are more likely, infants' families in DCS are more likely to have recent arrests in their history. They're also more likely to cite family stresses and financial stress as reasons why these children are coming into foster care. So keep that in mind also. Finally, infants are more likely to be adopted by their foster families. They are less likely to have disruptions to their placements. So when they are placed with a foster family, if they're not reunited, they are most likely to stay where they are, which means they are going to have fewer attachment issues, which is a good thing, let me tell you. But they are way more likely to have health and developmental problems. So if you think that adopting a baby is going to have fewer issues, let me just tell you right now, full stop, that is not true. Having spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in doctor's offices and occupational therapy and physical therapy and speech therapy and behavioral therapy and knowing that I will need to continue those things as my children get older, babies don't mean less issues. Now, I've said in another video, I made a video about special needs in foster care, and the point of that video was that it's more than you think. There are more special needs than you think in foster care, but it's not as bad as you're afraid of. So, having spent all these hundreds of hours in various therapies for my adopted infants who are no longer infants, the health issues are a very real thing, but they are not unlivable. They are not unaddressable. They are not a hopeless situation, and they don't need to control your life. But it is something to be aware of when you are considering what age group you want to work with in foster care. All right, so now that we've covered babies, let's switch over to teenagers. So a lot of the myths surrounding teens in foster care are that they are the bad kids or the problem kids, or that they deserve to be in foster care. And then also I've heard like, well, teens don't want to be adopted. And the truth here is a little more complicated. Being a teenager is difficult in the best of circumstances. If you think about most teenagers, even from very privileged homes, rebellion, pushing against the rules, discovering who they are, hormones changing, big feelings, those things are normal. I was like the biggest goody-goody overachiever as a teenager, and I did those things. So now imagine someone or something in your life fundamentally failing you, being told that now you need to go live somewhere else and meet all these expectations. No, they don't like it, but you wouldn't either. Yes, you are more likely to have attachment issues with teenagers. They are less likely to trust you than a small child, but that doesn't make it impossible. Most teens want a permanent launching pad to go out into adulthood and know that they have a landing place to come back to that is safely going to encourage them to grow and learn and become who they are as adults. So fostering teenagers can be a really cool opportunity to do that. And you may not see it right away. It can be, as parenting any teenager can be. It can often be kind of a thankless job. But those things that you talk about and you do and you come back to over time do make a difference someday. All right, so there is a higher need for families who are willing to foster teenagers because the demand on the foster parent side is higher for babies. 58% of teenagers are actually in a home with a family compared to 95% of children under 12. So that means that while yes, some of them are necessarily in residential therapy treatment facilities to address higher levels of trauma or behavior so that they can safely go to live with a family. That means a large percentage of teens end up in a group home because there are no foster homes willing to take them, and that is more like a dorm kind of situation than a family. In 2019, which was the most recent statistic that I could find, 17,000 children aged out of the foster care system in the United States. 17,000. 1,000 of them without a permanent family. They had not been able to go back to their parents or legal guardians, and they had not been adopted elsewhere. So they reached the age of between 18 and 21, depending on the state, and they were released from foster care to do the best they could on their own. Children who age out of foster care without a permanent home are much, much more likely to experience unemployment, homelessness, and incarceration. And we're not talking like someday down the road. We're talking like by the age of 21, by the age of 25, they are extremely more likely to have experienced those things in their lives. Children who age out of foster care are less likely to graduate from high school or earn their GED equivalent. The general population who have earned their high school diploma or the equivalent is about 94%, compared with only 80% of children who have aged out of foster care. And those who enroll in or finish college is even lower. 36% of the general population by age 26 have completed some kind of four-year degree, compared to only 4% of former foster children who have aged out of the system. So there's a huge opportunity gap. There's a huge education gap. They are less likely to have health issues, but they are more likely to have attachment issues. But it can be really rewarding to form a relationship with a teenager who is about to become a young adult and be able to support them and help them and launch them as they become adults themselves. That is a really rewarding relationship. Many of the teenagers in foster care don't know how to cook or bake or maybe even grocery shop. They don't even know what they're looking for. Doing laundry, making simple home repairs, how to study and do homework. Budgeting and personal finance is a huge, huge skill that a lot of these kids need to learn. And so those things, think about that. How to take care of yourself as an adult in the world, how to write a resume, how to fill out a job application, how to open a bank account, how to get your driver's license, that kind of thing. That, as a foster parent, allows you to have a really big impact in maybe a really short amount of time. So that is a lot of what fostering teenagers looks like. So what has our experience been fostering and adopting both infants and teenagers? Let me tell you, the statistics about health issues between babies and older kids are absolutely true. I have spent so much time in therapies with my little girls. And through no fault of their own, and it's not a bad thing, but it is a very real thing. And we knew this, but there is just sort of this continuous ebb and flow of special needs and addressing them that we will have for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And that's okay. It is manageable. It's something we had to come to grips with, but it's not as bad as you think it is. It's not scary. It's not impossible. It's just something to know. Being a teenager in foster care is really, really hard, and they need people who can come around them and support them and sometimes give them some tough love. So I realized recently that all of my younger children were terrified of becoming teenagers because they thought that a requirement of being a teenager was going through a stage where you run away. And so we had to have a conversation about how actually that's not normal. Teenagers can be really loving and fun and helpful. My younger kids have absolutely adored all of our older kids that we have had through our home. They love getting to know them. They love doing things like painting nails and doing hair and reading books and playing frisbee and lots of those things that older kids may get a lot of reward and enjoyment out of showing younger kids how to do. That can be a lot of fun. One of our former teenage placements, after like radio silence, not hearing anything for 4 years, reached back out to us and asked to reconnect. And that has just been so sweet. Let me tell you, as an adult now who is working and really kind of forging her own life, it has been so sweet to just be able to reconnect with her and encourage her and help out where we can and hear about her triumphs in life and even some of the struggles, and just to share life with her in that way has just been so sweet and wonderful. And so what we thought was a dead end and she was gone really turned into a rewarding situation for her to say, like, hey, I want you guys to see how far I've come. So I can say from experience that I'm really glad that we have that relationship with her. Right? So here's the truth about babies and teenagers. Neither of them are easy. Parenting isn't easy, whether your children come from your own body or someone else's. Neither of those age groups are easy, but both of them deserve to have a family and a home and support, and they deserve to have people who are on their side and are fighting for them, even when they don't like it. Because we were all teenagers at one point in time. Even when they don't like it or when other people don't understand what you're doing, they deserve to be fought for. So no, nothing is guaranteed. I can't tell you that if you take in a teenager, you're going to have this really rewarding, close relationship with them. I can't guarantee you're going to have that with your biological children either. And short-term heartbreak doesn't mean long-term failure. Again, we didn't hear anything from our daughter for 4 years. And to have her step back in was just a really beautiful thing, and I'm so glad that she did. At the end of the day, not a single one of us want to be judged or remembered by our worst or lowest moments in life. None of us do. But we all have them, and we all needed someone in our camp. So the truth is, neither babies nor teenagers are easy. But they both need you, and they both have their rewards. So thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful or interesting. Feel free to leave me any other questions about foster care and adoption and that process down below, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.